Before I do speak about Jack, I want to mention two things regarding World War II veterans. We have had 3 left in Foxboro. We now have 2, and one is with us today. Mr. Jack Grace is sitting near his son, the police chief. Could we take this opportunity to show Mr. Grace how grateful we are for what his generation has done? We're honored to have many of our veterans here today, but sir, we thank you and the greatest generation for your service. We also have Roger DiMarzio, who is still alive in Foxboro, but we lost Mr. Charlie Bridgham, World War II, a few days ago. Could we have a moment of silence in his honor? Thank you. An elderly female veteran of World War II, where she was away, and Korea, who dedicated the 1940s through 70s to helping veterans heal as a physical therapist in West Roxbury, was 89 years old and living at the Doolittle home here in Foxboro. And she began insisting that she needed to report to the Navy base in Newport. She wouldn't stop insisting that she was active duty. The Doolittle called her nephew to come and convince her. He pointed out that she was now walking with a walker. It had no effect. She insisted her commanding officer would be looking for her. A local town father stepped in, obtained a certificate of thanks, held a ceremony and did a recap of her Navy career, then presented her with a certificate of thanks from the President of the United States. The elderly Navy veteran then accepted that she was again retired. Peace was restored at the Doolittle, thanks to the man she so respected, Mr. Jack Authelet. I know, because I was the nephew who tried to convince her and failed, until in stepped a man she loved and respected, Jack Authelet. John Pendleton Authelet was born on September 26, 1932, on Baker Street in Foxboro. His dad, Emil, was a machinist. His mom, Ruth, took care of Jack's older siblings, Harry, Mary, and Emil. They were a close family, and Jack intentionally remained close with his siblings all the days of his life. He had many friends in Foxboro, attending Foxboro schools, including his good longtime friend, Charlie McAllister, who's in the front row to your left and my right. It was with Charlie and another friend that on a lark, Jack took a typing class in high school taught by Mrs. Sullivan. In the 7th grade, Jack was sitting in a classroom when he saw an angelic vision. Into the room walked the most beautiful girl he had ever seen. Her name was Marjorie McKay. She had attended the outlying Quaker Hill School the first 6 years of her schooling. Jack got to know her. They eventually went on a date bowling. Margie beat Jack. Jack didn't care. They were an item all the way through high school, class of 1950. President Truman had an unexpected phone call while home in Independence, Missouri on a Saturday night. He was told the communists had invaded Korea. U.S. troops were under attack. The Korean War had begun. In Foxboro, as these events overtook a generation of young people soon to face the draft, Margie McKay told Jack Authelet, "I'd rather be your widow than your ex-fiancé." Jack walked into a field across from Sunlight Farm and obtained permission from Albert and then Frida back in the kitchen to marry Margie. They were married on November 29, 1952 at Bethany Church by Reverend Paul Malacote. They went to Virginia for a honeymoon where they visited Earl Ferguson and his wife Talia, who had also just been married. When they got back, Jack's draft notice was waiting. And like the greatest generation before them, Jack and Margie were another young couple, as many were in Foxboro and across the nation, facing a war. Jack enlisted in the U.S. Army. January 12, 1953, he was inducted at Fort Dawes, Massachusetts, 5 days after President Truman announced the development of the hydrogen bomb, 8 days before General Eisenhower was sworn in as president. Fort Dawes was a World War II artillery base on Deer Island in Winthrop at the northern curve of Boston Harbor. It wasn't long before his unit received word they were shipping out to Korea. But then Foxboro and maybe a higher power intervened. Remember that typing class that Charlie and Jack took with Mrs. Sullivan? I believe, if my research is accurate, on May 12, 1953, an officer came into mess hall and called for attention. He had a question: do any of you know how to type? Jack put up his hand. Come with me, he was told. And he was put to work as a company clerk, doing administrative duty, and he was kept stateside as his unit left for Korea. That worked out well for a man married 6 months at this point into what would be a 65-year marriage with Margie. Jack told me about the night that an unidentified aircraft began circling Boston. The whole east coast of the U.S. was put on high alert. The circling aircraft would not respond to radio contact or identify itself. Finally, someone walked up and looked at the radar wand going around and around, and there was a pigeon sitting on it. They scared it away, and the mystery plane was gone. Jack served at Fort Devens. He achieved corporal status. He worked for the Army Security Agency with the Army Air Defense Command. Jack was honorably discharged at Fort Devens on January 11, 1955. He was given a bus ticket to Walpole, where he re-enlisted in civilian life. Jack was a very private and humble man, and he never told many people, but he was embarrassed to have stayed stateside while his unit went to face enemy fire in Korea. An hour from home, able to visit Marge whenever he could, safe. He knew these were rare luxuries. Commander Finn of our American Legion said to me once, "Credit every man and woman who served with respect. Wherever they are following orders. They are ready. They are willing to go when called." Jack needed carry no shame. He served, he followed orders, he was sacrificial in not seeking a deferment when he could have as a newly married man. There are many aspects to Jack's service to Foxboro that we could reflect on, and countless stories we could tell. 18 years as editor of Foxboro Reporter, his fellow townspeople forming opinions by asking, "What does Jack think?" meaning his editorials. He went on to lead the New England Press Association. He met every president from Carter through Bush 43. He had a laugh when in line waiting to meet President Clinton. His grandson, J.P., said, "I hope this is quick. I'd like to swim in the pool at the motel before it closes." Jack wrote our state criminal offender record inquiry law and worked with the legislature until they passed it. Jack and Jerry Rodman began Foxboro Discretionary Fund, which has helped countless individuals and families in need in our community. Jack with A.J. Dudley started Foxboro Cleanup Day. I'm old enough to remember in the 1970s when Jack single-handedly led the effort to restore the fence around the common. He raised money to restore it and enlisted Archie Hanna to make the molds to cast the new fence that we have today. Jack helped raise money for our flagpole in the center of Foxboro. We dedicated it on Flag Day 2015. We sang Happy Birthday to Marge that day. Jack was an endless promoter of the town of Foxboro. He loved our town. He loved that we care about each other. He and Margie once traveled to India for the Press Association so Jack could do talks on community newspapers. Margie got quite sick and was hospitalized while they were in India. The doctor came in the room one time and said, "Where are you folks from?" Jack said, "The U.S." "What state?" asked the doctor. "Massachusetts." "What town?" "Foxboro." The doctor said, "I used to go to the racetrack there and then eat dinner at the Lafayette House." Jack pulled out a Foxboro pen from his briefcase, handed it to the doctor, and said, "Come visit us again sometime." It was Jack who did research for us. He taught us about our families. He taught us about our buildings, our history, the great events of our past and present. He moved our hearts and brought us together with a sense of community. He told us we can be proud of being a small town with global impact when Ben and Rex Bristol went to China, among the first Americans there in the 70s, and built a Foxboro Company facility there. When the Patriots came to town, we were proud again, and he became friends with Robert Kraft. He and Marge really liked Myra. And Jack remembered our veterans. He pushed for the 29 memorial markers that we have around town, marking 29 people who paid the ultimate sacrifice for the freedom that we enjoy today. Every marker, by the way, is near the home where they grew up in Foxboro. I remember when Veterans Day had fallen to a brief ceremony of maybe 30 people in a room at the Legion. Jack stepped in, reorganized it, got friends involved, brought the community together, and made us proud. And about 25 years ago, we had to move to the high school auditorium because it had grown. He wrote about those who served in the Civil War. He told us about Jabez Davidson. If you go into Rock Hill Cemetery, past the chapel, and continue on the main drive down the hill, look to your left at the stones, and you'll see Jabez Davidson, who guarded a guy named Abraham Lincoln at a place called Gettysburg for the Gettysburg Address. And at 90 years of age, climbed a ladder to the top of the Memorial Hall to check on the condition of the Civil War soldier on top. Did you know the Civil War soldier is made of wood? Jack met with dozens of our greatest generation or their families to write down and preserve their stories forever. Like that of Clinton Davison, who was in a bomber flying over Germany and France and was shot down over France. Clinton went missing in action, and his family anxiously waited to hear whether he was alive or lost forever. His English fiancée, Glennie, deeply in love, left England and moved to Foxboro to be with Clinton's family. She always left flowers at her church, St. Mark's on South Street, on the altar in his memory over the years. That's how the rector knew his name. And Reverend Louis Pitt was walking in a cemetery in France when he saw a stone for Clinton Davison. The mystery was solved, where he had been laid to rest. And at last, Glennie knew her fiancé had died in that crash. In her final years, Glennie lived at the Doolittle home under the care of its president, Jack Authelet. Every night, the last face Glennie saw was in an old photo of a man in uniform as she kissed goodnight her fiancé, Clinton Davison. We're grateful today for an Army vet who never stopped serving, like many of our veterans, continuing to serve in the community. His beloved family, some of whom are here today. His daughters, his dear sons-in-law, 10 grandchildren, now 11 great-grandchildren. His service to Foxboro was immense, and I've barely scratched the surface. His respect for all our veterans is to be emulated as we thank you today for your service. Jack died still working on a way to honor our Spanish-American War veterans. He said they had been overlooked. He wanted to make that right. Jack became very prayerful and reverent in his final years especially, so I'd like to use his favorite expression to say thank you from my friend Jack and from our town for all of you who have served. Thank you, Jesus, for your service.